Hey everybody, and welcome. I am landscape photographer Austin James Jackson. Today I'm out here in the absolutely stunningly beautiful Kings Canyon National Park in the backcountry. Been backpacking for a few days, and that gave me the idea to make this review video. In this particular video, we're going to be covering one of my favorite lenses for landscape photography in general, especially for those of you that want to lighten the load on your pack, help make things a little simpler. And there's just so many pros to this lens. Now, the lens that we're going to be talking about today is on my camera. It's the Tamron 28-200. Maybe you can see it here. Maybe I can't. We'll see if it refocuses for you. But it's the Tamron 28-200, the f2.6, or I'm sorry, f2.8 to f5.6. So it's a variable aperture. Now, I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you are either a Sony user that is looking for a new lens potentially, or B, you're someone who is already aware of this lens and you are watching this video to try and figure out if it's actually a lens that is going to be worth purchasing for you. We're going to cover all of that in today's video. Hey, and before we dive into it, I just want to mention that this is not a sponsored video. I know there's a lot of people out there making sponsored videos for lenses. Tamron doesn't sponsor me to make this. I wish they did, because then I could make a little bit of money off this video, but I'm not sponsored at all. I don't care if you want to buy this lens. It really doesn't matter at all to me, but I'm just going to give you an honest review. I'll tell you the kind of photographers that it's for. I'll tell you the kind of photographers that it's not for. And if you do choose to buy it, I did include a little Amazon link down below. I'll throw an Adorama link in there as well. If you use those links, it'll help me out. It'll give me a few bucks, because again, I don't make any money for making this video. So if you're going to buy the lens, help me out, help me get a little bit more money, and help those large companies get a little bit less. It is just a couple bucks. So again, I really don't care if you buy this lens. Not a big deal. I'm going to tell you my true and honest opinion on it. I'll tell you what's good about it, and I'll tell you what's bad, and I'll let you decide for yourself. First thing I want to start with is just talk about who this lens really is for. Now, this lens really excels for landscape photography for a few reasons. Let me talk about why it doesn't excel at other kinds of photography first. If you're like a sports or a wedding photographer, having this huge range, just 28-200, and the variable aperture of 2.8 to 5.6 isn't really ideal. A lot of times for portraits, you're going to want that aperture to stay a little more steady, a little bit lower, for a little bit better background blur and more light transmission. And additionally, for like wildlife photographers, you're going to run into the same thing, I think. And honestly, 200 isn't really quite enough for wildlife photography. However, for landscapes, it's absolutely perfect, because the variable aperture, which is one of the big negatives for other kind of photographers, doesn't really matter. Most of the time for landscape photography, we're going to be using somewhere between f8 and f11 to ensure great sharpness on the lens, as well as that large depth of field, where we can get focus in the foreground and focus in the background all in one shot, or focus stack if we need. So that aperture doesn't really matter that much. Now, additionally, the range being 28-200, that's what, something like 8 times optical zoom, which is really, really good, in my opinion, for landscape photography, because I love having this lens on my camera, because I have such a wide range. I bring this thing backpacking with me because it's the lens that I can leave on my camera 9 times out of 10. Of course, I have like a 17mm lens as well, and even a 14 that I might use if I'm shooting a really big landscape like the one that I'm standing at right now. But for everything else, when I'm hiking and taking photos of various things here and there and trying to find little close-up intimate scenes, this lens really has me covered. And honestly, a lot of those wide angle shots, you can still get at 28 just fine. I will mention one of the downsides for landscape photography. A lot of us love to do night photography, myself included. Because of the variable aperture, this thing doesn't perform the best for night photography. It isn't really optimized. You'll see a little bit of coma on the stars and the corners. So if you're looking for a lens that'll cover you for night photos as well, this is not the lens for it. For me, it doesn't matter, because I have other lenses that I'm going to use at the same time. But if you're looking for like a true all-in-one, I don't really think there's one that's better, but this is not going to be the one that's going to capture those night photos good. However, if you're a Sony user, you could pair this with something like the Tamron 17-28 or the Rokinon 14mm, which is exactly what I use. Now let's talk about one of the features that I think this thing really excels at, which is the focal length versus the size of the lens. I mean, you can see it's not really that big on my Sony a7R IV. It's a big camera, but I mean, it fits really well. It's not too terribly big, and it's roughly the same size as this video that I'm shooting right now. I'm shooting it on the Tamron 17-28. This lens is very slightly longer than the Tamron 17-28, but it's the same width around, like the girth, I guess you'd call it. So it doesn't take up that much more space in a bag. Having that 28-200 range in such a compact package is huge for landscape photography. If you're a photographer that wants to just throw one lens on your camera and walk around and be able to capture everything from something close up at your feet to the wide angle scene, this really is a solid lens. It's, in my opinion, probably the best lens that covers that wide range between 28 to 200. It's just so compact. It doesn't weigh that much. I believe it weighs under a pound. I'm in the field right now. I have no cell phone service, so I can't tell you exactly how much it weighs. But when I go home and make this video, I'll put the weight right here so that you can see exactly how much it weighs. But it's not a lot, guys. It feels really nice on this camera as well. So overall, the weight and the compact size make this thing perfect for any photographer that really cares about having a lightweight system, lightweight setup. It's obviously great for backpacking where weight is really important, but I know there's a lot of photographers out there that shoot landscapes that for one reason or another, they really want to lighten their load. In landscape photography, a lot of us are hiking and traveling a long ways to the locations we want to shoot. So to make up this range on another lens, you would need something like a 24-70 and a 70-200. Both of those lenses are going to be bigger than this one, and you're going to have two lenses. So it's going to take up a lot more space and a lot more weight. This thing really just gives you a great bang for your buck when it comes to the size and the weight. Now, speaking about bang for your buck, let's talk about the price of this thing a little bit. Again, I don't exactly remember the price. I'm going to post it right here when I get home, but I know this thing is cheap. It's not super expensive, and cheap, of course, is a relative term, but I'm comparing this to other lenses on the market. You know, you've got Sigma lenses that are generally pretty expensive. The Sony lenses are, of course, very expensive. This thing is at least half the price of the 24-70, I believe, and it covers much more range. So price isn't too bad. I honestly think it's just a great do-it-all lens. It comes at a pretty good price as well. Okay, so finally, I don't want to seem like I'm just a huge homer for this lens. Of course, there is some things that aren't amazing about it. It can't be the cheapest price point, offer the widest focal range, and just be the best overall. So where does this lens fall short? If you are using this at the higher apertures, it does get pretty soft. You know, if you're shooting at f/18, f/20, in my opinion, as a landscape photographer, I never really need to do that. I don't really know of any kind of photography that needs to do that, but if you do like to shoot at those higher apertures, maybe you want to stop out some of that light and you want to capture a little longer exposure, it is going to be a little bit softer maybe, and most lenses do get quite a bit softer. This one's probably softer than some of the rest. Additionally, even at those mid aperture ranges, the sharpness is good. It's honestly really good. When I put it on the computer, it looks really sharp. I'm on a 60 megapixel sensor here, so I can really see that sharpness if it's not there, and it's honestly really comparable. If I really look into it and I took a bunch of photos on this versus maybe something like the Sony G Master, I would be able to tell a little bit that it's maybe just not quite as sharp, but you can make most of this up in post-processing. And for me, it's well worth it when I consider how much lighter and more compact this is, as well as the price. I'm a big price guy. I like stuff that's a lot cheaper, that still works good. So this is a big factor when it comes to this particular lens. And additionally, just regarding sharpness in general, yes, there's some lenses that are a little bit sharper than others. However, if we had this conversation 20 years ago, the sharpness between a average lens and a really great lens was huge. It made a huge difference. It was well worth spending the money for. These days, most of the popular lens makers, you know, your Tamron, your Sigma, your Canon, Sony, Nikon, Fuji, all those, they all have very, very comparable sharpness in the lens. It's pretty close. You got to zoom way in to see it. Most photographers, they just simply won't be able to see the sharpness difference unless you're really pixel peeping. So I personally don't mind the sharpness for this, but do be aware if you do get this lens that it might not be quite as sharp as everything else. But so finally, to bring it home, you can see I really love this lens. It's a great little lens for any landscape photographer that is weight or price conscious, or someone who just wants like a one quiver lens. If you only want to buy one lens, this is a great choice for landscape photography. Of course, it's nice to have one lens that's wider, but just having this alone, that 28-200 range, is really nice. I can be standing here shooting these beautiful mountains on a wide angle scene. I can instantly turn around if I see a cool texture on the ground around, zoom in and shoot that telephoto shot. So it gives me a ton and just so much versatility in one lens package here. And it's compact as well. I mean, if this thing wasn't compact, it would still be a solid lens. The fact that it's compact and it's cheap, honestly, it's kind of like too good to be true in my opinion. So there's my thoughts on this lens. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to see more examples or if you have any questions about this thing, let me know down below in the comments. Love to help you guys out. And lastly, I did include a little Amazon link down below. If you're going to buy this lens, do me a favor, buy it off my Amazon link. I'm not making any money to make this video. So if you do buy this lens, if you click my Amazon link down below, it's going to help me get a couple bucks when you buy this thing. It's going to be a couple more bucks in my pocket and a couple less in Jeff Bezos's pocket. So help me out, guys. Buy it down below if you're going to get it. But otherwise, I truly don't care. If you find a better lens, that's totally fine. I'm not going to try and sell you on this thing anymore. But hopefully I gave you a true and honest review. And as always, appreciate you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you guys next time.